I think the first thing to say is there's always going to be a difference in opinion in the extent of what needed to be done to get that deal over the line last week. My personal opinion, everyone was working hard. There seemed to be intent from the AJ side to try and do this. There certainly was from our perspective to try and do this. We made quite extensive requests over to their side, both verbally, both in email, both in text messages, chasing them down to try and engage with us in a quicker fashion last week. And it fell down because, quite frankly, we got to a point with them where the communication coming back from them and the substance of that communication, probably more accurate, was lacking. There was no, I would say there was no ambition on their side to help me try and keep the thing going. That's what it felt like by the end of it. And, we got to a point, I think, I heard Eddie say on that the last time we spoke was on Thursday. I think in video interviews that he did yesterday, he said that it was actually Wednesday. The truth of the matter is we were waiting for a turnaround on a contract to come back to them on Wednesday evening. We didn't get that. We instead got an email, a request from Frank Smith, who obviously works for Matchroom, to ask us if we'd be still, up for having discussions and to continue discussions. Quite quickly after that, Eddie and I spoke late in the night. It was left that he was going to email me something over to the extent of dealing with what they declared as their final issue related to the way that we drafted the contract, which was related to our position of having final say. On that call, I suggested that we insert some type of language to deal with having an arbitrator, a mediator in the place to settle disputes. We followed that up on Thursday, inviting them to engage with us on that last, I think, real remaining outstanding point at the top line. And that email didn't get responded to. The only conversations that I've had with them since then, I tried to call Eddie a couple of times on Thursday. He didn't answer my calls, didn't get back to me. I briefly spoke with Freddie Cunningham about 8:30 in the morning Thursday. It was left that he was going to come back to me and let me know their position on how quickly they wanted to move on this thing. I chased him up with a phone call, didn't get a return, didn't hear back from him on the text that I sent him. And the last bit of communication was myself and Frank Smith. We spoke on Friday, not relating to this, but to a different fight that we're looking to try and finish and finalise with Matchroom very quickly. On that call, we briefly touched on it. He said that he'd been out the loop. He'd been away travelling for work, but was going to catch up with his side and come back to me and let me know if there was anything that they could do in the short term to keep the conversations going. I didn't hear back. So my assumption is they as a group just decided for whatever reason that they didn't want to engage last week to try and get this thing over the line, which is disappointing.
Yeah, I mean, it seems, they're saying one thing, you're saying another. You come back with something else, they say another. I mean, Eddie Hearn this morning suggesting that it is done. The fight's off. I mean, can you now confirm, George, that it will not take place on December the 3rd?
I don't think there's any way it can, because when one side is told to expect a contract back, and again, I'm just going off of the conversations that I had and where they were constructive conversations. I think at the beginning of this thing, we all tried to keep this away from the press and the public. Eddie spoke on Thursday to the media. I think he confirmed to the media that they were going to send back a revised contract on Thursday. It didn't arrive. I didn't get it on Thursday. I didn't get it on Friday. I haven't had anything since. So yeah, I think that the take home from that is it looks like everyone's got to move on and focus on different things.
I mean, boxing fans listening to this, George, will quite rightly, in my view, be thinking, well, how come two of the most respected and powerful boxing promoters can't get this on?
I agree with you. And I think that,
so how come?
Be honest, well, I can only talk from the perspective of us. Where were we last week? We were on Monday, received a red line, not a final version, as Eddie said yesterday to the press. It was not a final version. It was still subject to Anthony Joshua's lawyers' comments that they sent over a red line on the contract that we had initially drafted. We invited them to do a Zoom the following day. That took place. We made suggestions on the way to deal with some of the outstanding issues. I think that they were received and accepted, and they were proposed then in writing with a turnaround draft on Wednesday. It was left at that point. The expectation was that they were going to turn something round to us. We would get on a call, try and figure this thing out, try and work through whatever issues anyone had. It was brought to our attention, as I say, late in the day on Wednesday night, that AJ was not happy with Queensberry having a final say. I think we made a very fair and reasonable compromise on that, to put some type of mediator or arbitrator in the middle to settle any outstanding disputes. That invitation went over in writing as well as over the phone in conversations I had with Eddie and with Freddie Cunningham. They didn't reply to that. They just didn't.
So is it a case, George?
That's where it got to.
Is it a case that somebody in amongst all of this doesn't want the fight to go ahead? And if that's the case, who's the somebody?
I don't think it's a blame game here. I'm not looking to point the finger at any particular individual. I think that there was intent from their side to make this fight in the first instance. My observation, my perception of it is, for whatever reason, last week they decided it wasn't something that they wanted to do in a fast and, what I would say, in a quite responsive matter.
And meantime, has Derek Chisora been offered a deal to fight Fury?
We are obligated to provide Tyson with fights. He's got an opportunity to have a voluntary defence of his title. This position's only come about because Usyk is unavailable in December. You've got to remember, the intent was always to go straight to the undisputed. And the only reason that this opportunity arose was because Usyk wasn't available, won't be available until early next year. So Tyson made it clear to us he wants to fight. He originally wanted to fight on the 12th of November. We had a date held. He came up with the idea. He wanted to see if this fight could be made. He made that offer. It was our job to try and get that offer into a place where it could be executed upon. That's why, personally, I worked extremely hard across a lot of different conversations, not just with Matchroom, not just with 258, but with the broadcasters, who I think were incredibly helpful, incredibly kind of productive and proactive about getting this done. We got to a point last week with them where deals in principle were agreed. We knew who was going to be doing what. We knew what participation DAZN were having, what BT were responsible for. We knew that the position that ESPN were going to have in America, as well as DAZN's. Now, this obviously needed to be formalised in a formal agreement, and that's not contested. But that dynamic shouldn't have slowed down, to my opinion, what I would say the progress that the parties were making. But there was a shift. There was a shift in them, I would say, being proactive to get this done.
George, what do you make of the observations that are floating around that the contract that Queensberry sent in the first place wasn't fit for purpose? It was a very, very basic and slightly unprofessional contract. What do you make of the observation that Tyson... Hang on, George, I'm going to ask you 3 or 4 questions, and you go in order. So
ask me one at a time.
That's the first one. The second one is Tyson Fury running around flapping his mouth on ultimatums. The third one is the observation that the arbitrator that you put in wasn't an independent arbitrator. It was a commercial partner of yours. And the fourth one is that Tyson Fury's playing possum with Anthony Joshua.
Okay, so I think in the first instance, the contract that we drafted, it was drafted following a meeting that myself and Jeremy Kogel, who's general counsel, Top Ranks lawyer, attended with Eddie and Frank Smith in London. Very good conversation. It was Eddie's suggestion for us to draft a provisions of services agreement, or a POS agreement, as we call it. A POS, in its context, is one entity requesting from the other side to grant rights that they have for us to then utilise and exploit. So that was the contract that we drafted on his suggestion. They quickly came back following that contract being sent to them and asked instead for it to be drafted in the form of a co-promotional agreement. Now, we jumped on that within 48 hours, had very good conversations at that point with Matchroom about redrafting that to fit that form. But they took what I would say a little bit more time than perhaps we wanted for that draft to get over to us. It took them kind of, I think, 7 or 8
So
days
you refute the
further
position
to get that back.
You refute the position that what you've papered wasn't fit for purpose.
I mean, look, it's just a load of rubbish. We wouldn't. Why would we send a?
What about
contract that
Tyson
wasn't
running
fit for
around?
purpose?
What about Tyson running around, issuing ultimatums left, right, and centre, rather than leaving it to the promoters to work it out?
Well, he did leave it to the promoters to work it out, but I think a lot of the public statements made from Tyson, it came from frustration on his side, on firstly not understanding why it was taking so long to get done. There are layers of complexity in this agreement, but at the same time, there was opportunity for us to make progress. And
and that opportunity seems to have gone. When at 10:30, Joshua.
Sorry, Jim.
Go on.
Let me just finish the point on that, because for the point on Tyson putting things out, that's absolutely true, and they can always say that was the reason that we down tools, as I think Eddie said last week. But at the end of the day, we were engaging with them still. We were talking with them. What I was asking for, kind of pleading with them, was, look, just give me something positive to go back on to show that this thing's still viable. Tyson's position was he just didn't see that coming in when I'm telling him that something's going to arrive and it doesn't arrive when it's going to, or it's something different.
George, last question. George, last question before we have to break. If blame attribution, if this fight is not going to get made, I believe that both fighters want to have this fight. Where does the blame lie in the inability to deliver an outcome?
I think the blame has to lie at the end of the day with. Sorry, I'm going to rephrase that. I don't think this is a blame game, Simon. I think what I don't understand, and I still don't get, is last week I felt that there was ample time, ample opportunity for us to get together on Zooms, to discuss any outstanding issues, to work through it with the lawyers. We had our lawyers available. I had my lawyers staying in a hotel around the corner from the office for 2 nights, ready to move on this thing, ready to try and finalise it. They just didn't want to move at that pace. Now, you have to ask them that question, why. But we're at a point now where the 3rd of December isn't that far away. They've also as well they've also confirmed to me they in themselves want to know what Anthony's plans are going to be.
So the whole thing's deadlocked, Josh. Josh, just to finish with, who does Fury fight in December the 3rd?
You'll find out very soon. And it will be a credible fight. It will be a good fight. It's going to be, Tyson back at a UK stadium before. What I think is likely to happen now is that we move forward with the undisputed fight in early Q1 next year away from the UK. So from the perspective of me, the fans should come out and see him, because you don't know how many times Tyson's going to fight in the UK now. How many times does he go again?
George, we appreciate your time, mate. George Warren, Chief Executive of Queensberry Promotions, with us live this morning. It would seem Fury and AJ has gone.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.